Bright Duty. Every student matters.
The next topic would be, what is an ion? Now we already know what is an atom. Atom is the smallest particle of a matter. What is a molecule? It is also the smallest particle, but it can be a molecule of an element or it can be a molecule of a compound. And it has got independent existence, which in case of atom may not be. Now what is an ion? Ions are basically electrically charged atoms. Now when I say electrically charged atoms, when you test the charge of an atom, atom is neutral, it has got no charge. But in case of ion, it has got charges. Now an ion can be either positively charged or it can be negatively charged. Positively charged ions are called cations. Alright, whereas the negatively charged ions are called anions. Now the question is, why do atoms have charges? The charge in an atom is basically because of the transfer of electrons to gain stability. Now what is transfer of electrons? Why does it happen? Is what we are going to learn in the coming chapter. For now you need to understand that atoms get positive charges by losing some electrons, whereas the anions becomes negatively charged because they have gained certain units, negative charges. So because atoms have lost some negative charges, so they are becoming positive, whereas anions have gained some negative charges and thus they have become negatively charged. Another important thing about ion is that they can exist independently. They are stable. Atoms are unstable, but ions are stable only when there is some charge in the atom. So when an atom becomes electrically charged, it becomes an ion. If it is positively charged, then it is called a cation, and if it is negatively charged, then we call it as anion. Cations are basically seen. Cations are characteristics of metals. Okay, whereas anions are characteristics of non-metals. So the number of charges that we will be putting up, whether it is positive or negative, depends upon the amount of charges that are there in that ion. Now for instance, if I have to explain what is the cations, what are the different cations, then it can be, we can take up calcium. It is dipositive, so the charge is +2. In case of magnesium, +2. Alright, iron, +2. So these are all cations. We can have aluminium, +3. Alright, we can have sodium, +1. Okay, so on and so forth. We find that metals, all these cations are with metals. If the metals have got 2 positive charges, then the overall charge of the ion is +2. If it has 2 positive charges in magnesium, then the charge of magnesium is taken to be +2. Sodium has +1, so the charge is +1. Aluminium has 3 positive charges, that's why its charge is +3. So we see that cations are positively charged. So positively charged ions are called cations. Positively charged ions are called cations, and we know that these are characteristics of metals. Anions are negatively charged. Negatively charged ions are called anions, and it is a characteristic of nonmetals. For example, we can have chlorine. So it is negatively charged. So the charge of chlorine is -1. Oxygen -2. Alright. Nitrogen, this is called as nitride, -3. Okay. We can have many other nonmetals which are negatively charged. So negatively charged ions are called anions. They can be chlorine, oxygen, nitrogen, so on and so forth. In case of hydrogen, we need to note that hydrogen can be placed both with cations as well as with anions. The reason is that hydrogen is the only element which can have both positive or negative charge depending upon the reaction, depending upon the combination it has. If it is combining with a cation, then it will behave like an anion. If it is combining with an anion, then it will behave like a cation. So depending upon with which it is forming a molecule, it will behave likewise. Now, what are polyatomic ions? Polyatomic ions means when group of atoms are charged. When group of atoms comes together and they have an overall charge, we call it as polyatomic ions. This can be either positive or negative. For instance, CO3. So, this is a polyatomic ion. This is again a polyatomic ion. This is again a polyatomic ion. Alright, so these are all polyatomic ions. Now, when we are taking into account anions, we will not name them as chlorine ion or oxygen ion. We will say chloride, oxide, nitride, hydride. That means we add IDE at the end of the name of the element. So, oxygen becomes oxide. The moment we say it's an oxide, it means it is O2 minus. The moment I say chloride, then we would mean that it is chlorine with one negative charge in it. So, anions, whenever we write the name of anions, we always change the name and end it with IDE, which does not happen in case of cations. So, I hope with this it is clear that what is an ion? An ion is an electrically charged atom. Atoms are neutral, but ions are charged. If they are positively charged, then we call them as cations. And if the ions are negatively charged, then we call them as anions. Metals are cations, whereas non-metals are anions. We also have polyatomic ions in which two or more atoms would come together and they will take an overall charge, then we call them as polyatomic ions. Clear? I hope with this you are understood what is an ion? Okay. Now, as you keep on practicing, you will get acquainted with the charges because it is very important to get hold of these charges, to learn them. So, as you keep on practicing, you will learn them, which you will be using it for writing the chemical formula in our subsequent topic. What are polyatomic ions? Give examples. Now, what are polyatomic ions? Please try and recollect. Yes, polyatomic ions are clusters of atoms which behaves as single ion. Okay, they are clusters of atoms that starts behaving as single ion. Okay, they are actually group of atoms that have some charges in them. Either they will be positively charged or negatively charged. For example, examples can be phosphate. So this is a polyatomic ion. We can have carbonate. which is also a polyatomic ion. Alright, we can have sulfate, which is also a polyatomic ion. Alright, so these are some other examples which can be put to explain polyatomic ions.